Okay, I mean, if we want to summarize, I'd say new space really is about new opportunities, new business models, and also new companies all around the world. And this is when I want to close this topic, and we want to start and kick off our next topic for today, which is B2B platforms and software as a service. FAMGA, GAFA, however you call them, Facebook, Amazon, Google, and co., they dominate the consumer markets worldwide. And they benefit from a platform economy and from network effects, which with ever-decreasing marginal cost and increasing platform value. But we are now entering a new era, and this is the era of B2B platforms, the B2B platform economy. We've seen new players already who are disrupting traditional industry sectors with their marketplaces. But nevertheless, B2B markets have got one big disadvantage compared to Amazon, Facebook, and co. Because they strongly focus on one individual industry sector, and they have to penetrate the sector really deeply, which in consequence means that scaling opportunities across multiple sectors are very limited. Nevertheless, I think we here in North Rhine-Westphalia have got a good chance to see the upcoming and new startups within the B2B sector. So I'm really excited to kick off this next topic. And we want to start by listening to a keynote of Tim Eschert. He's responsible for the European operations of Fero Labs. The high-tech company was founded in 2015 and supports industrial companies with AI-based software and demonstrates the benefits and the efficiency potential of machine learning in the process technology. And by using Fero software and explainable AI, that's how you call it, manufacturing companies can ensure quality, they can increase efficiency and reduce raw material consumption. So what did Tim do prior to Fero? He studied in North Rhine-Westphalia at the RWTH in Aachen, and he consulted startups as well as SMEs and Fortune 20 companies during the implementation of IoT projects, smart services, and artificial intelligence. And he's also an author and a keynote speaker, so let's welcome him today on our stage. Welcome, Tim. Give me a big round of applause, guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Celine. I could not have said it any better. I really liked the introduction you gave because you mentioned a few super relevant keywords for the topic already, and that is consumer. We see a ton of platforms in the consumer space, and the other one was marketplaces. We see a ton of, well, not a ton of, but a couple of platforms coming up as marketplaces in the B2B space. But the real platform that we think of when we think Google, when we think Netflix, when we think Amazon, we don't really have that in the manufacturing space yet. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so we don't really see that in the manufacturing space yet. So this is us, Fero Labs. We're a young high-tech company doing exactly that. We're a manufacturing AI company. We analyze manufacturing data in big industries, so in heavy processes like the chemicals industry, like the metals industry, lots of heavy processes, and we provide a software solution to these companies so that they can predict and analyze quality, that they can predict emissions, reduce CO2 emissions, for example, get a better understanding of how their factories and processes are running. And I believe that AI and platform are inherently coupled, especially in the B2B sector. And I had a very long title in the program. Actually, one of the things that you have to deal with when growing from like a very small startup to a young high-tech company is corporate design. And unfortunately, it didn't fit on the corporate design slide any longer, but I promise you, you're in the right presentation today. So how do we build a scaling platform in manufacturing industry, and I will of course use Fero Labs as an example. So 2 things we need to understand. Number 1, what is machine learning, what is AI, and what does it mean for the industrial sector? And 2, what really is a platform, and what is different in platforms in industry compared to consumer? This is something that we see all the time when we're talking to kind of industrial executives. Industrial executives, 65% of them say that they're not realizing value from AI. And when we ask ourselves why this is, we often see that the assumption we see in industry is that we just take a bunch of data, we throw some machine learning, we sprinkle some machine learning over our factories, and then we generate a lot of profit. This is the assumption that all enterprise innovation teams operate under. And when we look at the ML that we see in this equation, and I promise this is the only equation that you will see, the last equation you will see in my presentation, when we look at what they think when they think ML, it's that factories, consultants, they write some fancy code, they fit some programs over a certain database, and then that works forever. But it doesn't really work in the industry. We don't see any platforms that have taken over the manufacturing industry yet. And the problem with adopting machine learning and AI in industry is not really this code, but it's something else. And that has to do with how we think platforms. This is the short advertising block, Fero Labs. We have a software suite that we provide to factories to do exactly this, a scaling software platform to optimize efficiency, to optimize cost and quality on the one side, on a process level, but also on an asset level to get metrics around efficiency, to predict asset degradation, to get a better understanding of assets. Just the short advertising block. So why does conventional or like off-the-shelf machine learning and AI not work in industrial manufacturing? And I said that it has to do with platforms. So when we think of machine learning and AI, we often think tech. We often think, I've used Netflix as a platform example here, and Netflix is really good at processing data and generating value from the platform that they're providing. When we think Netflix or tech, we think that we throw in a collection of, for example, human taste into an algorithm, into a black box, and it gives us movie suggestions, for example. And this black box in the middle really is a black box. There's no way of interpreting why people like one movie over another. So we see black box models in the tech sector all the time, and these models are really good at generating value from large collections of data in the consumer space. What they're also really good at is image recognition, voice recognition, all the stuff that a lot of us use every day on their phones. Google's really good at predicting that this is a cat. But what if Google would predict that this, for example, is a potato? Well, it's not correct. What does it mean what does it entail for the customer in the consumer world? Well, any algorithm that predicts a wrong movie, for example, when I'm sitting on my couch on a Friday night and I get a movie recommendation that I really don't care much about, that's fine. I will probably just find a different movie. So by employing the big data, the large platform data that they collect over millions of customers, if they get one wrong but they still use their best efforts, the Googles, if the Googles and the Netflixes use their best effort to predict something, then it's fine to get something off every now and then. Making a wrong prediction in the industrial space is not fine. Making a wrong prediction in the industrial space leads to hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars lost. So coming up with algorithms that are able to generate value from platform data is really hard when we try to keep the definition of what a platform is that we have in the consumer world, where we look at human beings that behave similarly, when we look at images that have faces on them that have kind of similar properties. If we try and bring that same idea of what a platform is to the industrial world, we will run into issues. So there are similar faces, and it doesn't really matter if that face is on Instagram or on Facebook, but there is no second. There are no two identical chemical factories anywhere on the planet. Have a visitor. Anyhow, maybe I can get rid of this guy over here. Yeah. Anyhow, when there's something off in the algorithms, though, and we don't have a complete view of what things look like, for example, if we don't really know what a face looks like and try and interpret faces from inconsistent data, that becomes problematic, especially in the manufacturing space. And in consumer tech, not so much. That was basically what I was trying to say. It's a bit distracting, I'm sorry. All right. So I'm getting back at it. So basically what I was saying is that conventional machine learning is not really built to kind of work with with things that it doesn't know, and in consumer that's not really a problem, but in manufacturing it is a problem when you're trying to work with things you don't know. That's the bottom line of it. Let me skip that because I'm getting a bit distracted here. Bottom line, data issues in consumer tech aren't that problematic. Data issues in the industry are really problematic, and that's why we can't work with the same assumption of what a platform is in consumer and in industry. Platforms in B2B are also not inherently scalable. So in the consumer world, when we have a platform, we can kind of add infinite numbers of users to that platform. So we can just have the same Netflix and expand that same Netflix also to a new country, for example, because human behavior is basically the same across consumer industries. What we cannot do, though, is kind of look like one industrial process anywhere on the planet and try and copy that same, learn from that process and copy it to a different place elsewhere. So the way that platforms scale is very, very different between the consumer world and the B2B world again. Plus, customers in B2B, they don't really care about predictions and machine learning. But what customers, so this is a Fero story. When I talk to any customer of ours, they never want a machine learning product, but they really want a working manufacturing process. So no one has ever asked me for machine learning, but they've always asked me or us for quality analysis. But bottom line, what they really care about is a functioning process, period. And if we as a company want to build anything in that space, it has to be part of a bigger picture. It has to be part of the whole product. And Netflix works by itself. That's completely fine. And an Amazon also works completely fine. And those are the parallels that we can draw. We can easily also have a marketplace in the B2B sector. But when we talk data platforms, we can't just learn from somewhere and implement those models elsewhere. because the customer wants their working production line, and that means a machine learning model with quality predictions, for example, but it also means a sensor company. It means potentially a consultancy that does transformation processes, for example. So all of this needs to be part of the same platform or the same product, and making that whole product is more than one company does. And platforms in the B2B, and especially in the kind of B2 enterprise as a subset of B2B that we cater to as a company, these customers don't. They're not actively looking for one individual thing of that whole product. Also, oh yeah, this was the other point I was getting to. They don't strive for, they don't seek monopolies. So their markets in the consumer space are seeking monopolies in terms of there will probably only be one Facebook because everyone wants to be on the same Facebook. You've heard these presentations a million times on platform economics and how everyone wants to be on the same platform, I'm sure. But in the B2B world, companies actively don't want to be on the same platform. They don't necessarily want to be on the same data platform that their competitors are on. They don't necessarily want to be on the platform from the company that already built all their control systems. That is an issue that Siemens, for example, is often running into, where they have their industrial control systems, and now they're also providing a platform with that. And companies in the industrial sector are really afraid of lock-in effects. So a lot of things in the customer definition of what a platform looks like don't really apply to how we think of platforms in the B2B space. All that said, what can we do to still build platforms in the B2B space? How can we think platforms in the B2B space? First of all, compatibility is super important. Compatibility is key. In the consumer world, I cannot have any product, platform, or whatever that needs tailoring for every customer. In the B2B and particularly B2 enterprise world, we can have products that do scale and still require customization. We see this all the time with existing business models that don't necessarily call themselves platforms, like the SAPs of the world, like the OZPIs of the world, that are not platforms, that scale really, really well because they go for the 80-20 approach. They have maybe 20% customization, but an 80% standard product. Building that is fine, is probably necessary in the enterprise world. If I want a scaling product, I need compatibility with as many people as I can get compatibility for, and that does require customization to a degree. So customization is a really, really important factor to build anything scalable in the enterprise world. The second really important factor in the enterprise world is cost, actually. Cost needs to be justified differently in the enterprise world compared to how we justify cost in the consumer world. And especially when it comes to platforms, this is really an issue that companies care deeply about. If I'm charging an enterprise customer on the wrong parameter, they will misuse my product. Fero Labs, we're building a machine learning platform. If we were charging customers by gigabytes of data they put on our platform, that wouldn't work because they would try and save money by not giving us data that is really necessary for them to probably work to correctly work with the software we're providing. So the right incentive and incentivizing the customer correctly is really, really important on the enterprise side of things, and much more important on the enterprise than on the consumer, where I can have the value-based pricing idea. I try and estimate how much do people think my service is worth, and then charge them based on that. This is a case study that I very briefly want to get to that we're doing with Volvo Trucks. Volvo Trucks is the first customer of ours where we actually are allowed to write back into their database systems. What we're doing here in this case study is we're optimizing paint that is applied to the trucks, and they try and optimize the amount, and thus just cut costs on truck painting. And the incentive here is, of course, to not only cut cost, but also do something good for the environment, because paint is really problematic when being with recycling. Why does this make the application they're using a platform? There is a certain degree of customization. We need direct access to Volvo Trucks databases, for example. But then there's an 80% standard software that scales across factories within Volvo Trucks. So even though we have the APIs, we have the interaction with Volvo Trucks' databases, for example, the software that they use internally does scale really well internally. They have internal train-the-trainer programs where they onboard their new users of the software by themselves. It comes with all the properties that we think of when we think software platforms, but it is just very different from, for example, installing Netflix in a company. What's interesting here is that Volvo, by the way, was the first customer, as I said, that allowed us to also write back into their systems. And this is also really critical when thinking platforms the conventional way of just taking in data, because writing back, especially when pooling data from different companies on the same database system, for example, it gets really problematic. So what does all of this mean for building a B2B platform? What can we learn from this when we want to build B2B, or I prefer to say a B2 enterprise platforms in the real world? What does this mean for us? First of all, trust is the foremost reasons for, or lack of trust, I should have put it the other way around, but lack of trust is the foremost reason for platforms to fail in the enterprise world, and trust is the main and only currency that really counts. This is why a lot of not so great products from a purely nerd technical perspective make it into the real world, because people trust them on the enterprise side. So building trust with customers is the most important thing, the most important currency when it comes to building enterprise softwares. That means that any product needs to come with a few inherent parameters. In my personal definition, and this is, I think, my kind of to-go message when you want to either build your own platforms, or when you're looking for platform vendors in the enterprise space, look for trust. That means interpretability. It means understanding what a vendor does with my data and how it's being interpreted, and also how these interpretations come together. Adoption is very important. There's a very famous graph by author Geoffrey Moore. It's called Crossing the Chasm. A good book recommendation, by the way, that is particularly true in the enterprise sector, where you will reach the point of having a couple of implementations and having first customers, but then getting across that gap to actual bigger customers and bigger accounts. That is really, really important, especially in the enterprise world. And then ultimately, providing ROI is the only thing that at the end of the page an enterprise customer cares about. So if you can really explain well why and how you're providing ROI with software platforms in the enterprise world, that I think is kind of the key to be successful in building an enterprise scaling software platforms. I think, or I hope that I was able to provide a little bit of insights into not just how Fero Labs and AI works, but how to come up with a software platform for industrial manufacturing as an example, but this of course also works with other industries as well. This is a B2B trade show, so absolutely do check out all the enterprise software platforms that are here. The Fero Labs booth is booth number 5. You can find us in the hall, in the other hall directly on the right at the corner. So if you have Fero-specific questions, please come visit. We will also have a panel discussion after this. And Celine, I think, well, thank you for having me. Hand it back to you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And please give me a big round of applause for him. Thank you. And we'll actually see you in a minute, right, in the panel. So yeah, we'll have you back in a few moments.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.